the smell of lemon furniture polish mixed with the faint musk of old hymnals as Catherine Walsh adjusted her mother's veil for the third time in the basement dressing room of St. Michael's Lutheran Church. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. It was late afternoon on Saturday, June 14th, 1980, and Catherine had been awake for 37 hours straight. The night shift at the bottling plant had bled into a morning double at the diner, then 4 frantic hours of setting up her own wedding reception in the church hall. Her 8-year-old daughter Emma sat in the corner, silent in her pale yellow dress, watching her mother's reflection in the cracked mirror with eyes too old for her face. "You look pretty, Mama," Emma whispered. Catherine tried to smile, but the room tilted. The borrowed wedding gown, 2 sizes too big, safety-pinned at the waist, suddenly felt like it was lined with lead. Black spots bloomed at the edges of her vision. She heard organ music swell upstairs. Wagner, the processional, her cue. Catherine stood, gripped the doorframe, and walked toward the staircase on legs that had forgotten how to hold her weight. Emma followed 3 steps behind, clutching a basket of daisies they'd picked from the roadside that morning, because real flowers cost too much. The sanctuary doors opened. 100 faces turned. Catherine saw her fiancé, Robert, waiting at the altar in his rented tuxedo, his smile tight and rehearsed. She saw his mother in the front pew, lips pursed in barely concealed disgust. She saw the whispers ripple through the crowd. Single mother, shotgun wedding, gold digger, even though Emma was Robert's stepdaughter-to-be, not his biological child. Catherine took her first step down the aisle, then her second. On the third, her knees buckled. She went down hard, the veil tearing as she collapsed onto the red carpet. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed. Emma dropped her basket and ran toward her mother, but Robert's mother caught the child by the shoulder and held her back. "Don't make a scene," the woman hissed. Catherine lay on the carpet, conscious but unable to move, her vision swimming. She could hear the mockery starting, low voices, snickers, someone muttering about too much champagne even though she hadn't touched a drop. The humiliation burned hotter than the exhaustion. Then she felt arms slide beneath her. Strong, steady, lifting her like she weighed nothing. Through her blurred vision, she saw the face of Marcus Webb, the church janitor. 72 years old, black, with hands scarred from decades of manual labor. He wore his maintenance coveralls beneath the Sunday jacket he kept on a hook in the boiler room. "I got you, Catherine," he said quietly. "Just like I promised your daddy." The room went silent. Catherine blinked, trying to focus. Her father had been dead for 11 years, killed in a factory accident when she was 16. She'd never seen Marcus Webb before 3 months ago when she started attending this church. How could he have known her father? Before we go further, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Hit that like button if you're already hooked, and subscribe, because this story is about to take turns you won't see coming. Marcus carried Catherine past the stunned congregation, past Robert, who stood frozen at the altar, past his mother, whose face had gone pale. He walked her straight through a side door into the small chapel where morning light filtered through stained glass, and laid her gently on the wooden bench. "Emma," he called, and the little girl slipped through the door behind him, her face streaked with tears. Marcus produced a handkerchief and a small flask of water from his pocket. "Drink slow," he told Catherine. "You've been running on empty too long." Catherine drank. Her vision cleared. "How did you know my father?" Marcus smiled, but there was grief in it. Your daddy and I worked the same factory line for 8 years. He saved my life once when a hydraulic press malfunctioned. Pulled me clear with half a second to spare. He paused. Week before he died, he made me swear something. Said if anything ever happened to him, I'd watch over his little girl. Make sure nobody ever broke her. Catherine felt tears spill over. You've been watching me? Every Sunday you walked through those doors, looking like you were carrying the whole world on your back. Marcus glanced at Emma. And raising this beautiful child all alone, working yourself to the bone for a man who don't deserve you. Robert loves me, Catherine said, but her voice cracked. Marcus didn't argue. He just looked at her with the steady gaze of someone who'd seen too much to lie about what he knew. Outside the chapel, raised voices erupted. Robert's mother was demanding they continue the ceremony. Robert himself hadn't come to check on his bride. Not once. What kind of love leaves you on the floor? Catherine looked at her daughter, at the janitor who'd kept a promise to a dead man, at the chapel door beyond which waited a marriage that would swallow her whole, and for the first time in years, she asked herself a question she'd been too afraid to voice. What if she said no? The wooden bench creaked as Catherine sat up, her breathing still uneven. Through the chapel's narrow window, she could see the Illinois cornfields stretching toward a pale sky, the late afternoon sun turning everything gold and fragile. Marcus had stepped back to give her space, but his presence filled the small room like a shield. Emma climbed onto the bench beside her mother and took her hand. "Mama, can we go home?" Home was a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on 5th Street, where the dryers rumbled until midnight, and the walls were so thin Catherine could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. Home was where Emma slept on the pull-out couch, while Catherine took the bedroom floor, so her daughter would have something soft. Home was 3 jobs and an empty refrigerator and a stack of bills that never got smaller no matter how many shifts she worked. Robert had promised to change all that. "Your groom's asking for you," Marcus said quietly, though his tone suggested he'd rather eat glass than deliver the message. "Says the guests are waiting." Catherine closed her eyes. She'd met Robert Pritchard 7 months ago at the diner where she waitressed weekends. He was a regional sales manager for an appliance company, always wore pressed shirts, always left exact change for the tip. He'd asked her out 4 times before she said yes, mostly because Emma had started asking why they never went anywhere nice like other families. Robert had been patient, respectful. He'd taken them to the county fair, bought Emma cotton candy, told Catherine she deserved better than killing herself for pennies. He'd proposed on Valentine's Day in front of the whole diner. She'd said yes because she was tired. Because 27 felt ancient when you'd been on your own since 16. Because Emma deserved a father figure, and Robert seemed steady in a world that had never been. But he'd also made it clear his mother had to approve the wedding, that Catherine needed to look appropriate for his business associates, that Emma should probably call him Sir until they were properly a family. Small things. Red flags Catherine had been too exhausted to see. "I need to talk to him," she said, standing on wobbly legs. "You need to rest," Marcus countered. "You just worked a double shift and fainted in front of 100 people. That man can wait 5 more minutes." His mother won't wait 5 more minutes. Catherine smoothed her dress, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "She already thinks I'm trash." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Your daddy would have had words for a woman like that." "My daddy's dead." The words came out harsher than Catherine intended. She softened. "I'm sorry. I need to finish this." Emma hadn't let go of her hand. Catherine looked down at her daughter's face and saw herself at 8 years old, standing beside her father's casket, trying to understand why the only person who'd ever protected her was gone. Her mother had remarried within 6 months to a man who drank too much and hit too hard. Catherine had run away at 16, found out she was pregnant at 17, and had been running ever since. She was so tired of running. Marcus walked to the chapel door and opened it a crack, peering into the sanctuary. Pritchard's pacing up there like a caged animal. His mother's got half the congregation convinced you're drunk or worse. He glanced back. That what you want to walk into? What I want doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. The simplicity of that statement hit Catherine like cold water. When was the last time anyone had asked what she wanted? When was the last time she'd allowed herself to want anything beyond survival? A knock rattled the door. Robert's voice filtered through. "Catherine, we need to talk. Now." Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Just, "We need to talk." Marcus looked at Catherine. She nodded. He opened the door. Robert stepped inside, his face flushed, his cologne too strong in the small space. He barely glanced at Marcus or Emma. His eyes locked on Catherine with an expression that was equal parts concern and irritation. "What the hell was that?" he said. Catherine blinked. "I fainted. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. My boss is out there. My mother—" He ran a hand through his hair. "People are talking, Catherine. Saying you're unstable. Saying maybe this was a mistake." She waited for the apology, the relief that she was conscious and breathing. It never came. "I've been working," Catherine said quietly. "I worked all night so we'd have enough money for the reception. I haven't slept in—" "You should have told me you couldn't handle it," Robert interrupted. "I would have asked my mother to cover the costs. But now she's furious, the caterer's threatening to leave, and I look like an idiot." Emma's grip on Catherine's hand tightened. Marcus took a step forward, his voice low and steady. "Son, I think you're forgetting the part where you check if your bride is all right." Robert finally looked at him, really looked, and his lip curled. "I don't remember asking for your input, Marcus." "Didn't ask for yours either," Marcus replied evenly. "But here we are." The tension in the chapel thickened. Robert turned back to Catherine, his voice dropping into the syrupy sweet tone he used when he wanted something. "Baby, I know you're stressed. Wedding jitters, right? Let's just get through this. We'll laugh about it tomorrow." Catherine stared at the man she'd agreed to marry and felt nothing. No warmth, no safety, no love. Just the cold certainty that if she walked back down that aisle, she'd disappear into someone else's life and never find her way out. How do you leave when leaving feels impossible? She opened her mouth to answer Robert, to say yes, to apologize, to fold herself back into the shape he needed. But Emma spoke first. "Mama," the little girl said, her voice clear and small and devastating. "Please don't marry him." The room went silent. Robert's face darkened. "Emma, that's inappropriate." "She asked me not to call you Daddy," Emma continued, looking only at her mother. "She said I had to call you Sir until you said different. But you never said different." Catherine's heart cracked open. Robert stepped toward the child, his finger raised. "You need to learn respect, young lady." Marcus moved between them, his 72-year-old frame suddenly immovable. "You'll step back now," he said. And Robert, for all his bluster, stepped back. Catherine looked at her daughter, at the janitor who'd kept a dead man's promise, at the door leading back to a wedding that would kill her slowly, one compromise at a time. She made her choice. "I can't marry you, Robert." The words hung in the air like smoke. Robert stared. "What?" "I can't." Catherine's voice grew stronger. "I'm sorry. I thought this was what we needed. But Emma's right, and I'm right. And we deserve better than this." Robert's shock curdled into rage. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life." "Maybe," Catherine said, "but it's mine to make." He turned and stormed out, slamming the chapel door so hard the stained glass rattled. Catherine sank back onto the bench, her whole body shaking, not from exhaustion this time, but from the terrifying freedom of choosing herself. Emma crawled into her lap. Marcus sat down beside them, quiet and solid. Outside, the organ music stopped. The wedding was over before it began. But the real story was just starting. The church basement smelled of burnt coffee and anxiety. Catherine sat at a folding table in the storage room where they kept hymnals and Christmas decorations, still wearing the wedding dress, while upstairs the guests dispersed in waves of scandalous whispers. Emma had fallen asleep in her lap, exhausted from the emotional weight of the afternoon. Marcus stood by the door, a quiet sentinel making sure Robert didn't return. "You got somewhere to go tonight?" Marcus asked. Catherine hadn't thought that far ahead. The apartment lease was in her name, but Robert had a key. He'd helped pay last month's electric bill. He knew where she worked, where Emma went to school, every corner of the small life she'd built. "We'll figure it out," she said, though she had no idea how. Marcus pulled a chair over and sat down with the careful slowness of a man whose knees had logged too many miles. From his coverall pocket, he withdrew a yellowed envelope, its edges soft with age and handling. "Been carrying this for 11 years, he said. "Your daddy gave it to me the day before the accident. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to you when the time was right." He set it on the table between them. Figured today was that day. Catherine stared at the envelope, her father's handwriting across the front. For Catherine, when she needs to remember. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The paper was thin, fragile, like it might disintegrate if she breathed wrong. She carefully opened the seal and pulled out 2 folded pages, the ink slightly faded, but still legible. April 9th, 1969. My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're somewhere hard. Marcus promised he'd know when that was, and I trust him with my life, which I guess means I'm trusting him with yours now, too. Catherine's vision blurred. She could hear her father's voice in every word, the gentle rumble of it, the way he used to read her bedtime stories with all the character voices. "I don't have much to leave you, sweetheart. No money, no property, no grand inheritance. What I have is this. You are stronger than you think, braver than you know, and you don't owe the world your smallness just because people are more comfortable when you take up less space. Your mother, God bless her, she's going to tell you that survival means compromise, that love means sacrifice, that being a woman means making yourself convenient for everyone else. Don't believe her. Love isn't supposed to make you smaller. It's supposed to make you more yourself. And any person who needs you diminished to feel big isn't someone worthy of your light." Emma stirred in Catherine's arms, but didn't wake. "I know I won't be there to walk you down any aisle or meet my grandchildren or tell the boys who come courting that they better treat you right or answer to me. That kills me more than whatever took me out of this world. But here's what I need you to know. You are my greatest pride. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You feel things deeply. You love fiercely. You fight for what matters. Don't ever apologize for that. And if some man ever makes you feel like you need to be less loud, less emotional, less ambitious, less you, then he's not your man. He's just another person trying to fit you into a box so he doesn't have to grow. Marcus will help you. He's good people. The best kind. The kind who keeps promises even when nobody's watching. I love you, Catherine. I loved you the moment you were born, and I'll love you long after I'm dust. Be brave, sweetheart. Be loud. Be exactly who you are. Your father, James Catherine, pressed the letter to her chest and wept. Great, shaking sobs that she'd been holding back for 11 years, since the day they'd lowered her father into the ground, and her mother told her to stop crying because it was unseemly. Marcus sat quietly, letting her break. When she finally caught her breath, she looked at him with swollen eyes. "You've been watching me all this time?" "Not watching," Marcus corrected gently. "Waiting. Your daddy asked me to step in if you ever needed someone and had nobody else. But you're stubborn, just like him. Took care of yourself, raised that beautiful girl, worked yourself half to death rather than ask for help." "I saw you at the diner once," Catherine realized. "About 3 months ago. You sat in my section." Marcus nodded. "You looked like you were about to collapse even then. Saw that man you were with. The way he talked to you like you were an employee, not a partner. Knew then I'd have to keep closer watch. Why didn't you say something sooner? Would you have listened?" Catherine thought about it. Probably not. She'd been so desperate for the security Robert promised, so tired of fighting alone, that she'd convinced herself his coldness was just practicality. His mother's cruelty was just old-fashioned values. His control was just him caring. We lie to ourselves in languages we'd never accept from others. Emma woke up, rubbing her eyes. "Mama, are we in trouble?" "No, baby." Catherine kissed her daughter's forehead. "We're free." The storage room door opened and a woman stepped inside. Small, black, maybe 60, wearing a church volunteer badge and carrying a casserole dish covered in foil. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the dish on the table. "I'm Dorothy Webb, Marcus's wife." Catherine blinked. She'd never considered that Marcus had a whole life beyond this church. Dorothy pulled up a chair and sat down like they were old friends. "Heard what happened upstairs. Good for you, walking away. That Pritchard boy always did have his mother's meanness. You know Robert? Know his whole family. They've been coming to this church for 30 years, acting like they own the place because they tithe big checks." Dorothy unwrapped the casserole, baked chicken and rice, still warm. "But money doesn't buy character. And that boy has about as much character as a wet napkin." Emma giggled despite herself. Dorothy smiled at her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma Catherine Walsh." "That's a strong name. You hungry, Emma?" The little girl nodded. Dorothy produced paper plates and plastic forks from seemingly nowhere, serving them both generous portions. The food was simple but perfect, and Catherine realized she hadn't eaten since yesterday. They ate in comfortable silence while Marcus and Dorothy exchanged the kind of wordless communication that only decades of marriage could build. Finally, Dorothy spoke. "We've got a guest room. It's small, but it's clean, and it's yours for as long as you need it." Catherine's throat tightened. I couldn't impose." "It's not an imposition if we're offering. I'll find work, pay you rent. You'll heal first," Marcus said firmly. "Then we'll talk about the rest." Catherine looked at these two people she barely knew, offering her shelter without conditions, and felt the foundation of her world shift. For so long she'd believed safety came with price tags. Emotional, financial, physical. That kindness was currency, and she always owed more than she could pay. But here were two people asking nothing except that she let them keep a promise made to a dead man who'd believed she deserved protection. "Why?" Catherine whispered. "Why do this for me?" Marcus and Dorothy looked at each other. Then Marcus reached across the table and covered Catherine's hand with his scarred, calloused palm. "Your daddy saved my life once," he said. "Not just in the factory. When I came back from Korea, I was drowning, drinking, fighting, couldn't hold a job. Your father was the foreman who gave me a chance when nobody else would, taught me the work, kept me steady when I wanted to quit. He's the reason I got clean, reason I met Dorothy, reason I'm here at all." Dorothy nodded. James Walsh was good people, the kind who saw folks for who they could be, not who they'd been. "So this isn't charity," Marcus continued. "This is paying forward what we owe, and maybe teaching Emma here what real family looks like, the kind you choose, not the kind you're stuck with." Emma, who'd been listening with wide eyes, looked up at her mother. "Can we stay with them, Mama?" Catherine felt the last of her resistance crumble. "Yes," she said. "Yes, we can stay." Outside the storage room in the church sanctuary, Robert's mother was likely spreading poison about the woman who'd humiliated her son. The guests were probably laughing about the bride who collapsed. The town gossip mill would churn this story into legend. But in this basement room, Catherine Walsh was learning something her father had known all along. You don't need everyone's approval. You just need the right people in your corner. And for the first time since she was 16 years old, Catherine had found her corner. The Webb house sat on Maple Street, a modest two-story with peeling blue paint and a porch that sagged slightly on the left side. But when Dorothy unlocked the front door that evening, Catherine smelled cinnamon and old books and something indefinably safe. The living room was small, crowded with mismatched furniture and framed photographs spanning decades. Marcus in his army uniform, Dorothy in a nurse's cap, children and grandchildren Catherine didn't know existed. "Our kids are grown and scattered," Dorothy explained, leading them upstairs. "Chicago, Denver, Atlanta. We see them at Christmas if we're lucky. So this house has been too quiet for too long." The guest room had a double bed with a handmade quilt, a wooden dresser, and a window overlooking a backyard garden where tomato plants grew in neat rows. Emma immediately claimed the window seat, pressing her nose to the glass. "There's a tire swing," she breathed. "My grandson's," Marcus said from the doorway. "He's 14 now, too cool for it, but it's still good if you want to use it tomorrow." Emma looked at Catherine with desperate hope. "Tomorrow," Catherine promised, and watched her daughter's face light up like Christmas morning. After Emma was bathed and tucked into bed, the first time in months she'd had a bed to herself, Catherine found Dorothy in the kitchen, washing dishes by hand, even though a dishwasher sat unused in the corner. "Machine's broken," Dorothy said, reading Catherine's glance. "Marcus keeps meaning to fix it, but we manage fine the old way." Catherine picked up a towel and started drying without asking. They worked in comfortable rhythm, and Catherine realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd done something this simple without rushing to the next obligation. "How long were you with that Pritchard boy?" Dorothy asked. 7 months. "And how long did it take before you knew it was wrong?" Catherine's hands stilled on the plate she was drying. "About 3 weeks. But I convinced myself I was being paranoid, that I was too picky, that beggars can't be choosers." Dorothy made a sound of disapproval. "You're not a beggar, child. You're a woman who's been carrying the world alone since you were barely grown. There's a difference. His mother said. Catherine stopped, realizing how pathetic it sounded. His mother's a viper in pearls, Dorothy said flatly. Been that way since she married into money and forgot where she came from. Her people were mill workers, same as most folks around here. But she acts like she's royalty because her husband sold insurance and left her comfortable. Catherine absorbed this. Robert had always presented his family as old money, established, the kind of people who knew how things should be done. Another lie she'd swallowed because she was too tired to question. You got family besides Emma? Dorothy asked. My mother. She remarried after my father died. Lives in Kentucky now with her husband. Catherine's voice flattened. We don't talk much. Because she chose a man over her daughter? The accuracy of it stole Catherine's breath. How did you know? Because that's what women of her generation were taught to do. Secure a man, keep him happy, sacrifice everything else, including your children, to maintain peace. Dorothy rinsed the last dish and dried her hands. But that generation's dying out, Catherine. You don't have to repeat their mistakes. They moved to the living room where Marcus sat reading the evening paper. Dorothy settled into her armchair with some knitting, a baby blanket in soft yellow, and gestured for Catherine to take the sofa. We should talk about practical things, Marcus said, folding the paper. You still working at that bottling plant? And the diner. And I clean offices Thursday nights. Marcus and Dorothy exchanged a look. That stops now, Dorothy said. I need the money. You need sleep, Dorothy interrupted. You fainted today because you're running on empty. Keep that up and you'll collapse for real. And then what happens to Emma? The logic was irrefutable. Catherine had been pushing her body past its limits for so long, she'd forgotten what reasonable felt like. The diner pays the most, she said. I can keep that and drop the others. For now, Marcus agreed. But Dorothy and I've been talking. We think you should go back to school. Catherine laughed, a short, bitter sound. I didn't even finish high school. So finish it, Dorothy said simply. Get your diploma, then maybe community college. You're smart, Catherine. Your daddy used to brag about how you'd read books meant for kids twice your age. That was a lifetime ago. You're 27 years old, Marcus said. You've got a lot of lifetimes left. The possibility bloomed in Catherine's chest, terrifying and intoxicating. She'd been so focused on survival that she'd forgotten people were allowed to want more than just making it through the day. What do you do when someone hands you hope? I'll think about it, Catherine said, because accepting felt too big for one evening. They talked until nearly midnight, about small things, easy things, the kind of conversation Catherine had forgotten existed. Dorothy told stories about her nursing days. Marcus described his plans for the garden. They asked about Emma's school, her friends, whether she liked to read like her mother. Nobody asked Catherine to perform, to be smaller, to apologize for existing. She excused herself around 11:30 and climbed the stairs to the guest room. Emma was sprawled across the bed like a starfish, taking up all the space an 8-year-old could manage. Catherine carefully lifted her daughter and tucked her under the covers, then changed out of the wedding dress, finally, into an old nightgown Dorothy had lent her. She was folding the dress when she found the envelope in the pocket. Robert's mother's handwriting, addressed to Robert. It must have fallen into Catherine's pocket during the chaos. She knew she shouldn't read it, but exhaustion had stripped away her manners. She opened it. Robert, proceed as planned. Once you're married, the house transfers to joint ownership and we can move forward with the development deal. The Walsh girl is too desperate to ask questions. After the paperwork clears, you can always arrange a quiet divorce. She'll be easy to intimidate. Single mothers with no family support usually are. Your father would be proud of how you've played this. Mother Catherine read it 3 times, her hands shaking with something that felt like rage but burned colder. Robert hadn't loved her. He'd targeted her. The whole relationship had been a real estate scheme. Marry the desperate woman, get joint ownership of something Catherine didn't even know she had, then discard her once the deal was done. But what property? Catherine owned nothing except debt. Unless her father's factory accident, the settlement her mother had received. Catherine had been 16, traumatized, not paying attention to the legal details. Her mother had remarried quickly and moved, saying the money was gone, spent on debts Catherine's father had supposedly hidden. What if that was a lie? What if there was property in Catherine's name that she'd never known about? Property Robert's family wanted badly enough to orchestrate an elaborate con. She needed to find out. But it was nearly midnight on a Saturday, and the county clerk's office wouldn't open until Monday. Catherine climbed into bed beside Emma, her mind racing. For 7 months she'd believed Robert had chosen her, because he saw something valuable beneath the exhaustion and struggle. She'd been half right. He'd seen something valuable, just not her. But he'd made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated what a woman with nothing left to lose could do. Catherine lay in the darkness, listening to her daughter breathe, and began planning her counterattack. Because if Robert thought she'd collapse quietly, he didn't know Catherine Walsh at all. He'd met the desperate single mother. He hadn't met her father's daughter. And come Monday morning, he was going to learn the difference. Monday morning arrived with thunderstorms that turned Maple Street into a river of mud and made the world feel appropriately dramatic. Catherine stood in the bathroom mirror, dressed in clothes Dorothy had altered for her over the weekend. A simple navy skirt and white blouse that actually fit. She looked professional, determined. Nothing like the woman who'd collapsed in a wedding dress 3 days ago. Emma was at school. Marcus had driven her personally, introducing himself to the principal as family with such authority that nobody questioned it. Dorothy had packed Emma's lunch and braided her hair, small kindnesses that made Catherine's throat tight every time she thought about them. Now Catherine stood in the lobby of the Logan County Clerk's office, waiting for the records department to open. The building smelled like old paper and floor wax. Rain hammered against the tall windows. At precisely 9 o'clock, a clerk unlocked the records room door. A tired-looking woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain. "Help you?" "I need to search property records," Catherine said. "Under the name James Walsh. Death date July 16th, 1969. The clerk's expression shifted, something like recognition. "You're Jim Walsh's daughter." Catherine nodded, surprised. "I remember when he died. Terrible thing. He was good people." The clerk gestured for Catherine to follow. "What are you looking for specifically?" "Anything transferred to his estate or his heirs after the accident settlement." They descended into the basement archives where decades of Logan County history lived in filing cabinets and bound ledgers. The clerk pulled records with practiced efficiency, spreading them across a research table. "Here's the settlement paperwork from the factory accident. $50,000. Substantial for 1969. She traced a finger down the page. $20,000 went to your mother as the surviving spouse. The remaining $30,000 was placed in trust for you, to be released when you turned 18 or married, whichever came first." Catherine's heart stopped. $30,000? Plus accrued interest over 11 years. The clerk flipped to another document. The trust was administered by... She paused, her expression darkening. By attorney Gerald Pritchard, Robert's father. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Gerald Pritchard had managed Catherine's inheritance, never telling her it existed. When he died 5 years ago, his practice had passed to his partner, who happened to be Patricia Hoffman, Robert's aunt. The same Patricia Hoffman who'd been Robert's mother's sorority sister. The same Patricia Hoffman who'd helped plan Catherine and Robert's wedding. What happened to the money? Catherine asked, though she already knew. The clerk pulled more files. The trust shows regular disbursements for administrative fees and investment management that ate away most of the principal. By the time you turned 18 in 1971, there was supposedly only $8,000 left. Supposedly? The accounting is... The clerk chose her words carefully. Creative. And there's a second trust listed here that I've never seen before. Established the same day as yours. Also funded from your father's settlement. But this one's for property, not cash. She spread out a deed. Catherine stared at the words, reading them 3 times before they made sense. Her father had used $15,000 of the settlement to purchase 20 acres of farmland on the outskirts of town. Prime development land, according to the notes. Held in trust for Catherine Walsh, to be transferred to her name upon marriage or age 21. She'd turned 21 6 years ago and never known. Who administered the property trust? Catherine asked. Same attorney, Gerald Pritchard. The clerk met Catherine's eyes. And according to these files, the land is currently under contract for commercial development. Shopping center. The deal closes this Friday, 3 days from now, with the sale price listed as $175,000. Catherine felt the room tilt. But I never signed anything. Someone did. The clerk pulled out a signature page. See? Catherine Marie Walsh, dated last month. Signed in the presence of Patricia Hoffman as witness. The signature was a decent forgery, but it wasn't Catherine's handwriting. They'd been planning this for months. Robert's courtship hadn't been spontaneous. It had been calculated. Meet the desperate single mother. Romance her just enough. Propose quickly before she asks questions. Marry her, forge her signature on the sale documents, close the deal, then divorce her and disappear with the money. 7 months of her life. 7 months of convincing herself someone could love her. All of it a con. Catherine's hands shook as she held the forged signature. Rage burned through her exhaustion, white-hot and clarifying. Can I get copies of everything? She asked, already making them. The clerk's expression had gone from professional to conspiratorial. Your daddy was kind to me when my husband left. Helped me get this job when I needed it. I figure I owe him looking out for his daughter. 20 minutes later, Catherine walked out of the county building with a folder full of evidence and a clarity of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The rain had stopped. Weak sunlight broke through the clouds, turning the wet pavement to silver. She went directly to the police station. The desk sergeant looked up as she entered, a heavy-set man with a mustache and a name tag reading Kowalski. I need to report fraud and forgery, Catherine said. Kowalski pulled out a form. Name of the victim? Me, Catherine Walsh. And I need to speak to whoever investigates white-collar crime. Within an hour, Catherine sat in a small interview room across from Detective Linda Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, who listened without interrupting as Catherine laid out the entire story. The hidden inheritance, the forged signature, the wedding that was really a real estate scheme. Martinez studied the documents. her expression unreadable. This is substantial. But the Pritchard family has considerable influence in this town. I know. Going after them means going to war. I know that too. Martinez leaned back. Most people would take a settlement, walk away with something, rather than risk getting nothing. Catherine thought about her father's letter. About Emma learning what it looked like to fight for yourself. About the women who came before her, who'd been taught to accept scraps and call them blessings. I'm not most people, she said. Martinez smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. No, you're not. She stood and extended her hand. Give me 24 hours. I'll have enough to bring them in for questioning. Catherine shook her hand, feeling something she hadn't felt in 7 months. Power. She left the police station and walked the 6 blocks to the diner where she still worked weekends. The lunch rush was ending. Her manager, Pete, looked up from the register. Catherine, heard about the wedding? You okay? I'm better than okay, Pete, but I need a favor. Name it. Robert Pritchard comes in here sometimes, usually Tuesdays for lunch. If he shows up tomorrow, can you call me at this number? She wrote the Webb's phone number on a napkin. Pete studied her face. You planning something? Just want to talk. Uh-huh. But he pocketed the napkin. You need backup for this talk. You let me know. Your daddy was good to me when I was starting this place. Figure I owe his girl the same. Catherine felt tears threaten but held them back. All these years she'd thought she was alone, and all these years there'd been people who remembered her father, who'd been waiting for a chance to help his daughter. She just hadn't known to ask. Sometimes strength looks like accepting help. She walked home. She was already thinking of the Webb house as home, and found Dorothy in the garden, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. How'd it go? Dorothy asked without looking up. I found out I'm not poor, Catherine said. I'm rich, or I should be, and the man I almost married was planning to steal it all. Dorothy sat back on her heels, dirt on her gloves. And I'm taking it back. All of it. Good. Dorothy returned to her weeding. Dinner's at 6. Marcus is making pot roast. That was it. No shock, no excessive sympathy, no warnings about being careful. Just acceptance that Catherine was capable of handling her own battle. It was the most respect anyone had shown her in years. Catherine went inside, climbed to the guest room, and pulled out her father's letter one more time. She read it through, letting his words settle into her bones. You are stronger than you think. Tomorrow, Robert would learn exactly how strong. And by Friday, when that fraudulent sale was supposed to close, the Pritchard family would understand what it meant to underestimate Catherine Walsh. Tuesday afternoon brought unseasonable heat that made the diner's air conditioning work overtime and turned the vinyl booth seats sticky. Catherine sat in the back corner, wearing her waitress uniform even though she wasn't scheduled to work. Pete had called an hour ago. Robert had just walked in and taken his usual table by the window. Emma was safe at the Webb's house with Dorothy, who'd promised to make snickerdoodles and teach her how to knit. Catherine had backup she didn't even need to ask for. Marcus sat at the counter reading his newspaper, positioned where he could see everything. Pete worked the register with unusual attentiveness, and Detective Martinez sat 2 tables over in civilian clothes, nursing coffee and pretending to read a magazine. Robert looked tired. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loosened. When he saw Catherine approaching, his expression cycled through surprise, anger, and something that might have been shame before settling on defensive irritation. Catherine, what are you doing here? Working. What are you doing here, Robert? I come here every Tuesday. You know that. He gestured to the empty seat across from him. Look, about Saturday. You mean about the wedding I didn't go through with because I fainted from exhaustion? Catherine remained standing, her voice pleasant but her eyes cold. Or about the wedding that was actually a fraud designed to steal my inheritance? The color drained from Robert's face. Catherine set the folder of documents on his table. 1969 settlement, property trust, forged signature. Should I continue, or would you like to explain yourself? Robert's hand moved toward the folder, then stopped. Around them, the diner had gone quiet. Small towns had excellent hearing when they wanted to. I don't know what you're talking about, Robert said, but his voice cracked. Your father administered my trust fund. Your aunt witnessed my supposedly signature on land sale documents I never saw. You courted me for 7 months, proposed in public so I'd be too embarrassed to say no, and planned to divorce me the moment the deal closed this Friday. Catherine's voice never rose, never wavered. The only thing I can't figure out is whether you actually thought I was too stupid to find out or too broken to fight back. Robert stood up, his chair scraping loud against the linoleum. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. Catherine opened the folder, spreading documents across his table. Copies of the original trust documents, copies of the forged signature, copies of bank statements showing where the administrative fees actually went, to your father's personal account, and a deposition from the county clerk confirming that I never received notification about the property trust, as required by law. Marcus had set down his newspaper. Pete had stopped pretending to work the register. The other diners weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. Robert's face had gone from pale to red. My mother said, she told me you knew about the land, that you were trying to hide assets to get more in the divorce. What divorce, Robert? We never got married. The reality of what he'd just admitted seemed to hit him. His mother had lied to him too, used him as the pretty face for her scheme while keeping him just ignorant enough to have deniability. Almost. I loved you, Robert said, and for the first time he sounded genuine. At first, anyway, before my mother explained about the property, before she showed me the development plans and what we could make if you married the desperate single mother and forged her signature. Catherine finished. That's not love, Robert. That's convenience with a side of fraud. Detective Martinez stood up from her table and walked over, badge now visible on her belt. Robert Pritchard, I'm Detective Martinez with Logan County Police. I'd like you to come down to the station to answer some questions about property fraud and forgery. Robert's eyes went wide. I want my lawyer. That's your right, but your lawyer, Patricia Hoffman, is also being brought in for questioning, so you might want to call someone else. The diner erupted in whispers as Martinez escorted Robert toward the door. He turned back once, looking at Catherine with something that might have been regret or might have been anger at getting caught. I really did care about you, he said. No, Catherine replied. You cared about what I could give you. There's a difference. After they left, the diner stayed quiet for exactly 5 seconds before exploding into conversation. Catherine stood by Robert's abandoned table, feeling strangely empty. She'd imagined this moment would feel triumphant, the wronged woman getting her revenge, the underdog winning. Instead, she just felt tired. Pete appeared at her elbow with a slice of apple pie. On the house. You look like you could use it. Catherine accepted it, even though she wasn't hungry. Marcus joined her at the table, his presence solid and reassuring. Your daddy would be proud, he said quietly. Would he? Catherine poked at the pie. I just destroyed a man's life. You exposed a crime. That man destroyed his own life when he chose to steal from you. Marcus leaned back, and you gave him a chance to tell the truth just now. He chose to keep lying. Catherine thought about that. Robert could have confessed, could have helped build a case against his mother and aunt, could have shown actual remorse. Instead, he'd tried to deflect and blame until the evidence made denial impossible. You can't save people who won't save themselves. The diner door opened, and Dorothy rushed in, slightly out of breath. I left Emma with the neighbor. Are you all right? I'm fine. How did you know? Small town, honey. News travels faster than telephone lines. Dorothy slid into the booth. What happens now? Now the police investigate. If they find enough evidence, and they will, Robert, his mother, and Patricia Hoffman all face fraud charges. The land sale gets blocked, and I get what my father left me. Which is, Catherine pulled out the property deed. 20 acres of prime development land currently valued at $175,000. Plus whatever's left of the cash trust after we prove the administrative fees were theft. Dorothy whistled low. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of choices, Catherine corrected. She looked at Marcus. I could go back to school like you suggested, get my diploma, maybe go to college. I could give Emma a real childhood instead of dragging her through my survival. You could do a lot of things, Marcus agreed. What do you want to do? The question hung in the air. For so long, Catherine's wants had been luxuries she couldn't afford. She'd wanted safety, so she'd almost married a con artist. She'd wanted security, so she'd worked herself into collapse. She'd wanted to be loved, so she'd accepted crumbs and called them meals. But now, with actual resources and actual choices, what did Catherine Walsh actually want? I want Emma to grow up knowing she's worth more than what she can provide other people, Catherine said slowly. I want to build something that lasts, and I want... She paused, surprised by the honesty rising in her throat. I want to help other women who are where I was, desperate and alone and convinced they have to accept whatever scraps they're offered. Dorothy reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Marcus nodded like she'd just said something profound. And in that sticky vinyl booth in a small-town diner, Catherine Walsh began imagining a future she'd never dared to want. But first, she had to make sure the Pritchard family couldn't hurt anyone else. The investigation would take weeks. The legal proceedings would take months. But Catherine had something she'd never had before. Time, resources, and people in her corner who wanted nothing except to see her win. Justice was coming. And this time, Catherine would be the one standing when the dust settled. 3 months later, the Logan County Courthouse buzzed with an energy that felt both celebratory and vengeful. The preliminary hearing had drawn a crowd that spilled from the courtroom into the marble hallways. Reporters from Chicago, curious locals, and a surprising number of women who'd heard Catherine's story and recognized pieces of their own. The bailiff had to call for order twice before Judge Margaret Thornton even took the bench. Catherine sat at the prosecutor's table wearing a suit Dorothy had helped her pick out. Charcoal gray, professional, nothing like the exhausted waitress who'd collapsed in a wedding dress. Emma was in school, safe and happy, already making friends in her new classroom. Marcus and Dorothy sat in the front row of the gallery, silent pillars of support. Across the aisle, Robert sat with his new attorney. His mother had refused to pay for his defense once she realized he might testify against her. Patricia Hoffman sat separately, her face carefully neutral. And at the far table, Eleanor Pritchard sat ramrod straight in designer clothes, her expression radiating contempt for everyone in the room. The charges were substantial: fraud, forgery, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit theft. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, the forged signature, testimony from the county clerk, and most damning of all, a wire recording Detective Martinez had obtained of Eleanor Pritchard instructing Patricia Hoffman to make the Walsh girl's signature look shakier, like she was nervous. They'd gotten sloppy, arrogant, certain that a single mother with no resources would never fight back. Judge Thornton reviewed the preliminary evidence with the kind of methodical attention that suggested she didn't appreciate fraud being committed in her jurisdiction. Finally, she looked up. "Ms. Walsh, I understand you'd like to make a statement before we proceed?" Catherine stood. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. "Your Honor, 3 months ago I almost married a man who saw me as a transaction instead of a person. I almost signed away my rights because I was convinced I didn't deserve anything better. I almost taught my daughter that women should be grateful for whatever attention they receive, even when that attention is predatory." She paused, letting her words settle. "My father died when I was 16. He left me an inheritance that was supposed to give me choices, security, a foundation to build on. Instead, 3 people in this courtroom conspired to steal it. They forged my signature. They manipulated me emotionally, and they would have succeeded if I hadn't fainted from exhaustion and given a man who actually cared about me a chance to intervene." Catherine turned to look at Robert. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "I don't think Robert is evil. I think he's weak. I think his mother raised him to believe money matters more than integrity, and that people are resources to be exploited. I think he probably did care about me in whatever limited way he was capable of caring about anyone." Eleanor Pritchard's face hardened. "But weakness isn't an excuse for cruelty, and I won't accept apologies that are really just regret at getting caught." Catherine faced the judge again. "What I want, Your Honor, is for these people to face consequences. Not because I'm vindictive, but because the next desperate woman they target deserves to be protected. The next single mother struggling to survive deserves to know that the system will defend her when powerful people decide she's easy prey." The courtroom was silent. Judge Thornton nodded slowly. "Ms. Walsh, this court appreciates your statement, and I want you to know that property fraud cases involving vulnerable individuals are taken extremely seriously in my courtroom." She turned to the defense tables. "Mr. Pritchard, Ms. Hoffman, Mrs. Pritchard, based on the evidence presented, I'm binding all 3 of you over for trial. Bail is set at $50,000 each. Trial date is set for January 12th, 1981. You are ordered to have no contact with Ms. Walsh or her daughter. Violation of that order will result in immediate incarceration. Do you understand?" 3 voices muttered agreement. As the bailiff called the court to recess, Catherine felt something release in her chest. Not triumph exactly. The trial would take months, and justice was never guaranteed. But accountability, the recognition that what had been done to her mattered. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Catherine had prepared for this, coached by Detective Martinez on how to handle media attention without compromising the case. "Ms. Walsh, how do you feel about today's outcome?" "Relieved, grateful for a justice system that takes fraud seriously." "Do you have a message for other women in similar situations?" Catherine looked directly into the camera. "You're stronger than you think. You deserve more than survival, and there are people who will help you if you're brave enough to ask." The questions continued, but Marcus gently guided her toward his truck. Dorothy had already climbed in, and they drove home through autumn streets painted in rust and gold. Sometimes winning looks quiet. That evening, Catherine sat at the Webb's kitchen table with paperwork spread before her. Documents from the county about her property, information about getting her GED, college brochures Dorothy had collected. Emma did homework beside her, occasionally asking for help with spelling words. "Mama, what does triumph mean?" Catherine smiled. "It means winning after you thought you might lose. Like when you beat the bad people?" Something like that. Emma returned to her spelling, satisfied. Catherine watched her daughter, this fierce, tender little person who'd held her hand through the hardest days and never stopped believing they'd be okay. The phone rang. Dorothy answered in the living room, then appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Catherine, it's for you. Says she's a reporter from the Chicago Tribune. Wants to do a feature story about women fighting financial fraud." Catherine took the phone, her heart racing. A feature story meant exposure, meant other women hearing what was possible, meant the Pritchard family's crimes becoming public record beyond Logan County. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When Catherine hung up, she was crying. "What's wrong?" Emma asked, alarmed. "Nothing's wrong, baby. Everything's right." Catherine pulled her daughter into her lap. "The reporter wants to tell our story. She says women all over Illinois are calling her about similar situations. Men who targeted them, families who manipulated them, lawyers who stole from them." "So we can help them?" Emma asked. "We can try." Marcus appeared in the doorway, understanding dawning on his face. "You're going to turn this into something bigger." Catherine nodded. "There has to be resources. Legal aid for women who can't afford attorneys, support groups, education about financial rights." She looked at the property documents. "And I have land worth enough to start a foundation." "Your daddy's legacy," Dorothy said softly, "turned into something that helps people." Over the next weeks, Catherine's story spread. The Tribune feature ran on the front page of the Metro section. Other papers picked it up. Women started writing letters, hundreds of them, describing their own experiences with financial manipulation, forged signatures, stolen inheritances. By December, Catherine had met with 3 lawyers interested in pro bono work and a social worker who wanted to establish a shelter specifically for women escaping economic abuse. The foundation was taking shape, built on 20 acres her father had bought with his life insurance money, hoping his daughter would have choices. James Walsh had given her more than money. He'd given her proof that she mattered. The trial came in January. It lasted 4 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Robert received 2 years and probation. He'd cooperated with prosecutors, testifying against his mother and aunt. Patricia Hoffman received 5 years. Eleanor Pritchard received 7 years and a substantial fine. Catherine sat in the courtroom and felt nothing dramatic. No surge of triumph, no bitter satisfaction. Just the quiet certainty that she'd fought for herself and won. That evening, back at the Webb's house, though she'd started looking at small homes to rent, knowing she needed to give them their space back, Catherine tucked Emma into bed. "Mama, are we safe now?" "We're safe." "Are we going to be okay?" Catherine kissed her daughter's forehead. "We're going to be better than okay. We're going to help other people be okay too." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, already drifting toward sleep. Catherine stood in the doorway, watching her daughter breathe, and felt her father's presence like a hand on her shoulder. "Be brave, sweetheart. Be loud. Be exactly who you are." She'd done it. Against every odd, every obstacle, every voice that told her to accept less, she'd become her father's daughter, and that was triumph enough. 5 years passed like water through open fingers. The Catherine Walsh Foundation occupied a renovated farmhouse on the 20 acres her father had left her. Half the land sold to fund operations, half kept as a working community garden where women learned to grow food and confidence in equal measure. The building smelled like fresh paint and coffee, always coffee, because the women who came through the doors often arrived exhausted from night shifts and custody battles and the grinding mathematics of poverty. Catherine stood at her office window on a Tuesday morning in April 1985, watching Emma, now 13 and tall like her grandfather, teach a group of younger children how to plant tomatoes in the raised beds. Her daughter had inherited James Walsh's gift for making people feel seen, valued, worth the effort. The foundation had helped 217 women in 5 years. Legal aid for property disputes, financial literacy classes, job training, emergency housing, a network of pro bono attorneys who'd heard Catherine's story and wanted to be part of the solution. Dorothy handled intake coordination, her nursing background perfect for assessing crisis situations. Marcus maintained the property and served as the gentle grandfather figure dozens of women had never had. And Catherine ran the organization with the same fierce determination that had carried her through 3 jobs and a wedding that never happened. They'd just hired their first full-time social worker. Applications for the summer internship program had tripled. The Chicago Tribune was planning a 5-year follow-up feature. But Catherine's favorite moments were the quiet ones. Like yesterday, when a 23-year-old woman named Maria had come to her office with her first paycheck from a job the foundation had helped her find. Tears streaming down her face because she'd never held money that was truly hers before. "Thank you," Maria had whispered. "Thank you for showing me I could fight." Catherine had hugged her and thought of her father, of Marcus keeping his promise, of the janitor who'd carried her when she couldn't stand. A knock on her office door pulled her from the memory. Dorothy poked her head in. "Catherine, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." "Who?" "Robert Pritchard." Catherine's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen Robert since the trial. He'd served 18 months of his 2-year sentence, been released early for good behavior. She'd heard through the small-town grapevine that he was working construction in Springfield, living quietly, keeping his head down. "Do you want me to send him away?" Dorothy asked. Catherine thought about it. She could refuse to see him, and no one would blame her. But curiosity won out. "5 minutes," she said, "and keep the door open." Robert looked different, older, thinner, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Prison-aged people, or maybe it was just conscience catching up. He stood in her doorway holding his hat, looking more humble than she'd ever seen him. "Catherine, thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes." He nodded, accepting the boundary. "I've been sober for 3 years, in therapy for 2. Working on myself, trying to understand how I became someone who could do what I did to you." Catherine waited. She'd learned that silence made people tell the truth faster than questions. "My mother's still in prison. She refuses therapy, refuses to admit she did anything wrong. Patricia got out last year, moved to Arizona." Robert's voice was flat, reciting facts. "I know I can't undo what happened, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What you meant when you said I saw you as a transaction. Is that why you came? To tell me you understand?" "I came to apologize. Really apologize, not the half apology I gave in court when my lawyer told me it might reduce my sentence." Robert met her eyes. I'm sorry, Catherine, for lying to you, for using you, for being too weak to stand up to my mother when she turned you into a mark." Catherine studied his face, looking for manipulation, for the performance she'd learned to recognize. But all she saw was exhaustion and genuine remorse. "I forgive you," she said, and watched surprise flicker across his features. "You do? Forgiveness isn't for you, Robert. It's for me. I spent too many years carrying anger that was poisoning my own life." Catherine leaned against her desk. "But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. It doesn't mean friendship. It means I release you from the space you've been taking up in my head." Robert nodded slowly. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably. But I'm not interested in giving people what they deserve anymore. I'm interested in building something better than the cycle of hurt we inherited." They stood in silence for a moment. Through the window, Emma's laughter drifted up from the garden. "Your daughter's beautiful," Robert said. "She looks happy." "She is. We both are. I'm glad." And strangely, he sounded like he meant it. "I should go, I needed you to know that what you built here, this foundation, it inspired me to try to be better. I volunteer now, teaching construction skills to men coming out of prison, trying to help them avoid the mistakes I made." Catherine felt something shift. Not forgiveness exactly. She'd already given that, but recognition that people could change if they chose to do the work. "Good luck, Robert." "You too, Catherine, though it looks like you don't need it." After he left, Catherine sat at her desk and pulled out her father's letter, now carefully preserved in a frame. She read it sometimes when decisions felt heavy, when doubt crept in, when the work seemed too big for one woman who'd started with nothing but rage and 20 acres. "You are stronger than you think." Marcus appeared in the doorway, Dorothy behind him. "You all right?" "I'm fine. Better than fine." Catherine stood and joined them by the window, watching Emma teach children how to make things grow. "I was just thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind." "Your daddy left you property," Marcus said. "But more than that, he left you proof that you mattered. That's the real inheritance. And now you're leaving that same proof for every woman who walks through these doors," Dorothy added. Catherine thought about the 217 women, about Maria with her first real paycheck, about the single mothers who'd learned they didn't have to accept cruelty disguised as love, about Emma growing up knowing her worth wasn't negotiable. Love isn't supposed to make you smaller. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. Not money or property or even justice, though all those mattered. The real inheritance was the knowledge that you could fight for yourself and win. That kindness existed without conditions. That promises kept to dead men could save living women. That night, Catherine tucked Emma into bed, though at 13, her daughter barely fit the description of tucking in anymore. "Mama, do you ever think about the wedding that didn't happen?" "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because if you'd married Robert, we wouldn't have this." Emma gestured vaguely at the life they'd built. The foundation, Marcus and Dorothy, all the people we've helped. Catherine smiled. "You're right. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things, if we're brave enough to find the path." "Do you think Grandpa James would be proud of you?" "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." Emma yawned and closed her eyes. Catherine watched her daughter drift toward sleep, this fierce girl who'd held her hand through collapse and resurrection, and felt gratitude so profound it ached. She walked downstairs to find Marcus and Dorothy in the living room, playing cards like they did most evenings. Join us? Dorothy offered. Catherine sat down, accepted the cards Marcus dealt, and felt the simple peace of being exactly where she belonged. Outside, spring rain began to fall, gentle and steady, nourishing the garden where tomorrow more women would learn to plant seeds and believe in harvest. The Catherine Walsh Foundation would continue its work. More women would find their way to those doors. More lives would be transformed by the simple revolutionary act of being told, "You matter. You deserve better. You are strong enough to claim it." And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in whatever exists beyond this world, James Walsh watched his daughter carry forward the promise he'd made when she was born. Be brave, sweetheart. Be loud. Be exactly who you are. Catherine had done all three, and the story was just beginning. They say if you drive past the old Morrison land on certain spring evenings, you can still see lights in the farmhouse windows and hear the sound of women's laughter drifting across the garden. Proof that sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because every woman deserves to know she's stronger than she thinks, and that the right people will be there to catch her when she falls.